So just before we get into this episode, I wanted to let you know about a new resource available on our website. The healing process after leaving an abusive relationship can be challenging to navigate. There are plenty of different resources available, but all of that choice can be overwhelming. This is the reason I decided to create a directory of trauma coaches and therapists that work with survivors of domestic violence. They are able to provide a safe space for you to share your experience while also being able to guide you through the healing process. If you'd like to view our coaching directory, just head over to our website, afterdarkpodcast.com. These are the stories of the brave, the strong, the survivors. This is the After Dark podcast.
If you can make it through living in abuse, you can so make it through life after abuse.
You know, like you're going to push through, and you've just gone through one of the worst experiences, and so if you imagine what kind of strength that takes, you're going to be okay.
But if I could even just help one person just to leave sooner, then that would be amazing.
This is episode 35 of the After Dark podcast. Okay, so I thought we might start at the beginning, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit about your home life growing up and what the relationship was like between your parents.
Oh, okay. So yeah, look, I grew up in a typically dysfunctional family. So I was born in 1974, so grew up in the 70s and 80s, and an emotionally distant father, a mother who didn't sort of understand why the relationship didn't go well. I had a sense from a very early age as to the actual humanity of parents. Parents are people first, and they're flawed humans. So I've got a younger sister, and it was just the two of us. So look, yeah, I witnessed dysfunctional relationships very early on in my life. And I guess I would say that what I took from that is that relationships are fragile, and they require the investment of both people in order to be sustainable and to be healthy. It did engender in me a strong sense of independence from a very early age, because my parents were quite caught up in their own emotional sort of battles. So I have been fairly independent. I guess what I've had to do as I've gotten older is unlearn that independence in a relationship context, I guess, because yes, you can do it all on your own, but if you're going to be with someone else, then it is good to have a bit of give and take, and it is actually okay to accept support from other people, which is very interesting in terms of then my experience with domestic violence. When you're very, very independent, it's a huge unlearning curve, I guess, to understand that you do actually have the right to seek support from other people and to accept support from other people. When you feel that you rely on yourself, you can find yourself in life in situations where you're not able to rely on yourself. So it can be quite uncomfortable then receiving support from other people, but that's actually everyone's right. We live in a community, and we're humans, and humans are community minded generally, and there is plenty of support and help out there. It's about understanding where it is and accessing it and being okay to receive it.
So I was wondering if you could explain what it was like in the beginning of the relationship with your partner.
Look, in the beginning, it developed like any other sort of sort of relationship, there were no warning signs. He had mental illness in terms of depression. But having said that, lots of people have depression that don't go and do what he did. I guess the wheels really started to fall off when we had kids, and there were the stress and pressures with having children, and young children. There's this societal, I call it the Meadow Lee commercial view, that children actually bring parents together. I don't agree with that. There's an adjustment when you have kids. There's a change in the dynamic of the relationships, and that certainly happened with us. And look, as it was when I was pregnant with my youngest, my son, I had the first-hand experience of his depression. And then as time went on from then up until obviously the age of my youngest was 7, there were sort of increasingly erratic behaviours, so a lot of self-sabotage at work and in relationships and so forth. And so that's sort of when the wheels, we drifted apart, and then he was unfaithful, and he was sneaky. He did some pretty average things, like pawning my engagement ring to pay for prostitutes and whatnot. Wasn't really interested in working, would get a job and then do something, so he would then be let go and so forth. So, look, lots of relationships start and finish. This one just didn't finish very well.
So how long were you in the abusive relationship for? And was your partner abusive the whole time?
10 years I was in the relationship, and look, there's probably emotional abuse that went on for a few years prior. There was in 2014 is when the significant domestic violence incident happened. In 2011, he contracted chicken pox, and one morning he tried to smother me with a pillow. A psychiatrist said he had psychosis, so varicella induced psychosis. Interestingly enough, though, so that was one incident in 2011. The night before he stabbed us all, I asked him what he thought when he moved back into the house after a period of time after he'd done that with the pillow, and he said, "I thought I could get away with anything."
Oh, wow.
Now, hindsight's a beautiful thing, right? but at the time, it didn't even occur to me the night before that what he did was even a remote thought. I thought we were sort of separated under the same roof at the time. We'd been for a week when I asked him that. And I thought that we would just have a lot of sort of passive aggressive animosity between us until we got to a situation where he could move out. So even when he said that, I had no idea of what he was planning. No.
So looking back, can you think of any warning signs or red flags that your partner could have potentially been abusive?
Look, if there was any disagreement or if there was any challenge, he would shut down. He wouldn't discuss it. He wouldn't try and figure out a way to kind of navigate through that. In hindsight, that's a red flag. He also had a family that believes, and still to this day, believes that he could do no wrong. So in hindsight, the fact that he clearly had no accountability when he was growing up and was never had to be responsible for his behaviour. It's only when he was an adult and started working, obviously his employer doesn't have the same tolerance as what his family would have. That's probably a red flag. And yeah, just the I wouldn't say the depression. Lots of people have depression, but he his behavior, it was erratic and it was odd. But look, it wasn't a slow burn of physical violence, I guess. It very much came out of, other than that one incident that was attributed to chickenpox induced psychosis, there was no other physical incident until that day. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff is obviously brewed in his head for a very long time.
I just wanted to let you know that the next part of Andrea's story might be triggering for some people. If you don't feel comfortable hearing this, please skip forward 9 minutes from now.
Yeah, so on the 2nd of February, I was asleep. We obviously didn't sleep in the same room. And I sleep on my side, and I woke up because there was very sharp pain on the outside of my leg, just below my knee. And I looked up and I just saw this silhouette of a man, and I realized it was him. And then he just started raining blows, aiming at my neck and my groin, repeatedly stabbing me with 2 knives. So I obviously, which look, anyone would do, you try and fight, and I was trying to grab the knives, and he was just going backwards and forwards between my neck and my groin, trying to get some major arteries. I rolled over the bed and actually got myself wedged between the bed and the wardrobe, which the wardrobe had glass doors, and that's not very handy when there's a lot of blood involved. But he basically kept going until I lost consciousness. And then he went out of the room, and my son came out of his room and sort of said, "Daddy, what's going on?" And he stabbed my son twice in the back of the neck. And then my son said, "Daddy, that hurted." And then he told my son to go and wait down in the lounge room because he had intended to kill us in birth order. And then he went into my daughter's room and he started in on her, and I'd lost consciousness. What brought me around was my daughter screaming, "Daddy, please don't kill me." And then I don't know how, I remember trying to get up, and I was screaming, "No, no," with the glass mirror, the glass wardrobe doors, so blood is extremely slippery. And I remember feeling incredibly frustrated that I couldn't get up. I don't remember this, but apparently I got up, somehow, and I staggered into my daughter's room that was next door to mine, and I got myself between him and her, and I was effectively using my body as a shield to stop him stabbing her. And so I've got a number of injuries on my back. That actually, unbelievably, had the effect of, it confused him because he stopped because he thought that I was dead. So he said in his statement he couldn't understand how I was up because he left me dead in the other room. And he was sure I was dead because of the amount of blood. So that confused him. And then what happened was he stopped and he went and stood. He's holding 2 knives. And he went and stood at the entrance to my daughter's room. And I apparently said to my daughter, Mummy's tired. I'm going to lie down now. And I passed out face down in her room. I then came to at some point, and then so that then commenced. He was panting, and I couldn't understand it at the time. And of course, as you do, you will find strength and resilience and the ability to fight where you think it's not actually humanly possible to do it. And I was telling him that it was okay and the situation was retrievable. And he kept sort of panting. And then my daughter, who had just unbelievable injuries to her neck and her stomach, she said to me, Mummy, do you want me to get the phone? And I said, oh, that'd be really good, darling, not really understanding what that meant. She walked past him with all her injuries, is holding the knives, and walked down to the other end of the house and got the phone, and then walked back up past him and put the phone in my hand. And I called 000. And 000 is great. But when you're in that situation and they say, please fire an emergency, I just said, everyone. And they said, what's happened? I said, my kids and I have been stabbed. And they said, where? And I said, everywhere. So then what seemed like an eternity, he's panting, we're pleading with him. And then I don't know how long it was, maybe it was 15 minutes. The police banged on the door. Now, he was actually a police officer for 17 odd years, so he knew. He put the knives down on the ground and he went and opened the door with his hands up because he knew if he was holding the knives, they would have shot him. And then my daughter said to me, which is just extraordinary, Mummy, do you want me to get the knives? And I'll throw them under the bed. So if he comes back up the hall, he can't get them. She's 9 years old at the time, and she had the foresight to think and say that. I had no concept of how bad it was at the time until the police officers obviously got him secured, and they came up to the room, and police officer, all I heard her say was, oh shit. And then that point, I was probably the closest at the time that I came to death, because the extent of my injuries, but the threat was gone. So I didn't have to fight. So I didn't have that adrenaline to try and stay alert. I didn't know at the time where my son was or what had happened. But then my kids got taken to one hospital and I was taken to the other. And so then what started was, I don't remember the only thing I remember in the ambulance is, why aren't they going faster? Like, I thought, why aren't they going faster? I found out afterwards that because I'd lost so much blood and I wasn't stable, they couldn't go fast. They had to try and keep me alive, sort of thing. So then I woke up again in an emergency, and what was really, really good was between the hospitals where my kids were and where I was, they were ringing the hospital that my kids were. So as I went in and out of consciousness, they gave me updates that my daughter and son had been in surgery and they were going to live. So that was everything when I was in emergency, to know that my kids hadn't died because of what he did. And then after about 5 or 6 hours, apparently I was stable enough and I went into surgery, and then began the recovery. So I was in the hospital for about, I think I was in hospital for 10 days because I ended up having a couple more operations. I had some nerve damage that they didn't, because they did life-preserving surgery on the initial day. They hadn't picked up some nerve damage and so forth. My kids got let out after about day 5 or 6, so I was really lucky. My sister brought them over to where I was, so that was the first time I'd been able to see them after what had happened. And look, the recovery sort of started. It was everything to see my kids, but I had so many tubes and stitches because I was stabbed 71 times. Like, I was just covered in stitches and drains and you name it. They didn't know where to hug me. But I said to them, the first thing I said to them was, obviously, I love them. And I said they were heroes. I said they did exactly what they needed to do in that situation, that we didn't have to have what ifs because we had a what happened, that it was a truly horrible thing, but they got through it and they're amazing. And we still we were still part of society. So we still needed to have manners and consideration, and we still needed to participate in society. And now it was within our power to live a magnificent life if we chose to. So they're the things that I said to my kids straight up. And then, look, we had to, because the house was a crime scene, so we weren't able to go back to it. We stayed with my mum for a week or so, but then a family from the primary school that my kids attended took us in. They're just angels, and we stayed there for 6 or so to 8 weeks. It was really close to the school, so the kids were back at school within a week of me getting out of hospital. It was really important for them to have normal again. I mean, obviously what happened to them was completely not normal, but to have normal again, like, just after I got out of hospital, the kids had been out of hospital for about 5 days or so. They the school had like a fun day, and the kids asked if they could go. And I said yes, because I said you just need to be mindful of your injuries. And like my daughter, I said, if your tummy hurts, just, sit down and rest. But I let them go to the fun day because it's, life goes on. Life doesn't stop. And the more that we could overlay what's considered normal, the faster their recovery. So yeah, I had months and months and months of outpatient visits to the hospital, the orthopedic section, because of my nerve injuries to my hand and so forth. The kids had a couple of years scar management treatment. And yeah, then so began then the arduous journey of legal disentanglement.
So was that then the last time that you had seen him, or was that later on through that legal process?
No, the last time that I saw him was that morning. Yeah, and it's my hope that none of us have to ever see him again.
Yeah. So throughout this time in your life, did you have much support from friends or family?
Yeah, I had incredible support from my workplace, the community, like the school that's near the house, sent us care packages. Community rallied around us. Friends were amazing. My sister, look, interestingly, we still live in the house that it happened. What I said to the kids was, when it was thinking about it, the house didn't do this to us. He did it. And he doesn't have the right to push us out of the house until we're ready. And I also had a sense of what happened to us was sort of published quite widely on the media. And for my neighbours, I wanted to overlay good memories in this house. I didn't want this house to be known as, that house where that mum and her two kids got stabbed. We had stuff like, because we used to have carpet in the house, and my daughter said, I don't want carpet. And it's because there was so much blood embedded in the carpet everywhere in the house. So the house was essentially gutted. And my sister coordinated a huge working group of people that sort of repainted the inside and ripped out the carpet, and a plumber up the road redid the bathrooms. And yeah, so we're very lucky. And then because of the extent of our injuries, I got my sister was great in terms of accessing what was available. And if you are a victim of a crime, there's a victims of crime sort of assistance. And the money that I got from that, I used to replace things in the house. So I got timber laminate flooring, and interestingly, that they will reimburse you for the clothes that you're wearing. But when I fell between the bed and the wardrobe, I fell on a lot of clothes, and they don't cover for that. So yeah, so we moved into the house, back into the house after about 2 months. And yeah, I just wanted the kids to have, for this to be a safe space for them, and also for my neighbours. People sort of say, I've had questions like, oh, why did he do this? If people who are rational and who are decent don't do things like this, we need to ask ourselves the question, is it really to our benefit to understand an unhealthy mind? It doesn't matter why he did it. What matters is he did it. And this is a thing that is a generalized prejudice for women and men who've experienced domestic violence, because there's this thing in relationships that both people contribute to it. When it comes to violence, it doesn't matter why. What matters is it happened. And that's all people need to be concerned about, is the fact that for whatever reason, he thought the appropriate course of action was to kill his family. That is never an appropriate action, ever. So I've sort of, obviously, the kids, as they're getting older, and it's human to try and search for meaning for things. Sometimes there's no rational explanation for it. And you just need to focus on the fact that it happened. And are you going to let it define you? Or are you going to accept that it happened and find a way to manage those feelings, feel them, sit with them, manage them, let them go? And it's cyclical. You can be okay some days and you can be not okay other days, but that's part of the human experience.
I was wondering, how do you think that your future relationships might be affected after previously being involved in an abusive relationship?
Look, I've been in a relationship now for 5 or 6 years, and my view on it is not every man is like the one that committed the violence. And look, yeah, fair enough. There's people, there can be just patterns of cycles of abusive relationships and so forth. In my situation, I took enough time to heal as much as I could. And the reality is, to lead a full life, you've got to get to a point where you have an element of trust in other people. Because even though domestic violence is incredibly prevalent, it's still the minority in terms of the community, the overall community. So what I've had to do is basically be aware of my responses. Am I having a heightened fight or flight response because of what happened to me, or is it because of the actual sort of situation? And look, appreciating that I've had one like truly explosive experience of violence rather than a regular kind of cycle of it. But I don't have the energy to fight internal demons every day. There's a lot of other stuff in life that is more worthy of my investment. So truly horrible things have happened to me, but they're just part of my story now.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to somebody that might be in a relationship with a survivor of domestic violence?
The advice that I would give is, be gentle with them, but don't treat them like a bird with a broken wing. So look, domestic violence is a truly horrible thing. Everyone has something in their life that has impacted them in a negative way, and it's not a competition in terms of degrees. Like, you could have something that's not, from the outside doesn't seem that bad. It's been incredibly detrimental to a person. So I think you apply it the way you would do it with any relationship. There's a certain amount of baggage that comes with your experience in life, and be cognizant and considerate of them. Look, I've had some instances of PTSD in terms of like, if there's been a movie and there's been stabbing in it, and my partner loves horror movies and all of that sort of stuff. I can't abide by it. I remove myself from that situation. Look, if a person is very, very, I won't say damaged, but very impacted by domestic violence, that person owes it to themselves to do the internal work to get it to a place where it's not affecting their day-to-day relationships. No one understands. It's very, very difficult. People think, oh, yes, I can understand what that person went through. No one understands what you've been through. Different people's experience of the same stimuli will be different. And look, I appreciate that I've had the ability to do this because I'm a very pragmatic person, but I have chosen to not let this define my participation in the world. Yes, I am optimistic. That's not to say, though, that I don't live with elements of fear in every day. I mean, he got 3 life sentences to be served concurrently with a 15-year non-parole period. I have a truly horrible timeline in my life as to 2029 is when he is eligible for parole, and I have to gear up for that to try and keep him in jail. And the other thing that people may not realise is for someone that is incarcerated, they are able to apply for early parole at any time. And there is categories that they can apply for it, and it goes to the parole board and it's heard. And up until recently, they could apply for it as many times as they like. Now, people that are in jail for violent crimes, they have to wait 12 months after they've applied. So in my situation, he has already applied for early parole. That is horrific, to get a call from the victim assist office to say that, well, I actually got an email to say that he had applied and the application was denied. I had no say, so I could have got a phone call saying he's applied and it's been granted.
Oh, so there was no prior notification. It was just like that final result.
Yep. People don't realise, because legislation is a one-size-fits-all approach, that is available to everyone. Now, they've recently introduced legislation that people that are convicted of murder can remain in jail indefinitely, so parole can be denied. I wrote to the minister, the Attorney General and the minister, and said, well, people that are convicted of attempted murder should have this legislation apply to them as well, because what you are doing is you are legislating based on the outcome, not on the intent. Like, he didn't intend to only attempt to murder us. He intended to murder us. So my view is that people that attempt to murder people should be required to have that legislation apply to them too. All they've done is said that no, their application for early parole, they just have to wait a year now, instead of they could do it as many times as they liked. What it's designed for is, the example that I was given was people that have, say, committed tax fraud, and they're in the last month of their sentence and their mother becomes terminally ill, then they can apply for early parole to go and be with their mother. And I went, well, that doesn't really translate to someone who's tried to murder his family, and this is available to them as well. Like, it's, but again, this is a one size fits all. And the other thing is, I think it's really important. So the criminal process took about 2.5 to 3 years. It's a very, very long time. And there's one thing is moral justice, but then there's legal justice. The two aren't the same. So if you're looking for a moral victory, it's not there. Don't waste your energy trying to get a moral victory, because the legal process it's very, very rigid. Yes, it's for humans, but it's based on the legislation. It's essentially a bargaining arrangement, and you are merely a bit player in the process. So I wrote a victim impact statement as part of the sentencing, and they give you the option to read it out in court. And I said, I asked, will it make any difference to the sentencing outcome if I read it out in court? Acknowledging it would be incredibly taxing for me to do that. And I was told no, because your victim impact statement is submitted with the sentencing materials, the brief that's done by the DPP. It's passed to the defence. The judge considers it in the context of all of the other documentation that the judge has. So they've already made their decision before you read it out. So if you're going to read your victim impact statement out in court, really, really think about, is the impact to me emotionally to do this worth the potential impact to the person that did this to me? And in my situation, he would have been taken down to a cell under the court, because it's not reasonable that he would see me or I would see him. But after the sentencing, I was disgusted, frankly, with the sentencing. But it also comes down to, they look in the sentencing, they said, oh, he did not have a prior conviction. He cooperated with police. They took that into consideration when they sentenced. So this is what I mean with the moral. There is no moral victory in this. Your moral victory is how much you let the actions of another person stain your life going forward. The legal stuff you've got to leave to the lawyers. And look, there was downgrading of charges that were done. They dropped off because the police will apply every charge that they can. And then the DPP and so forth, that's the bargaining aspect. They'll just drill it down to what they consider to be the essential. And they'll do that without consultation. And with respect to the legal process, you may think that you've got a right because it happened to you, but the legal process is about focusing on the person that did it and how they're to be punished. And interestingly, in the victim impact statement, you're not allowed to refer to the crime. You can only talk about the impact of that crime. And I put in that we shouldn't have to die for him to be in jail for the rest of his life. I put that in my victim impact statement. But under the legislation, attempted murder is life, 15 years non-parole. That is very taxing. And I would say to people that have matters going through the court system, find ways to practice self-care, find ways to let go of what you can't control. You can't control the legal process. It's happening because of what happened to you, but it is completely separate to you. And that can be difficult for people. That they're because they're trying to interweave their moral victory with a legal outcome. And then when it came to the divorce, it took about 2.5 years. And that was because he refused to speak to his lawyer.
Oh, so that just dragged out that whole process.
Yeah, it does. And that is soul destroying because you don't want to have any connection to the person whatsoever, but they can continue to protract it. And what you need to do is understand the way I looked at it eventually was he is weak and he knows that he has lost control. This is what he can control. So that, and because he refused to engage with his lawyers, usually you'll get the custody and the property and the divorce. You might get the divorce first and then you've got 12 months to sort out the custody and the property. I got custody first because I've got sole parental responsibility, and then sorted out the property, and then I got the divorce. Because particularly with the custody, I needed certain outcomes. And that's the other thing with divorce. It is a bizarre, going to family court is bizarre. It's they bargain for your order as to when you'll be heard. You go in with groups of other people. So in my situation, in the group that I went in, I was the only one that didn't have the other party going in. And then the 10 other people that were waiting for their turn got to hear my whole story. And then look, after the sentencing, I got contacted by a couple of media outlets, but I didn't respond to any of them because there's nothing that I could have said that would have changed the outcome. And I need to be, my focus is trying to give as normal an upbringing to my kids as possible.
Yeah, definitely. Andrea, I can tell that you are such an incredible and inspiring role model to your children from what you've been sharing, and they're so lucky to have someone like you in their life.
Thank you for saying that, but the reality is 3 of us all had very different experiences on that day. It's been a big learning curve for me in terms of when you're parenting kids who've experienced domestic violence, you're forever questioning when things happen. Is this as a result of just their development or their personality or their evolution, or is it as a result of the violence? And the other thing I've really had to work on is if my kids have displayed behaviors that have triggered something in me, I shouldn't project what's going to happen. Like, sometimes you just have to accept the behavior for what it is. My kids are going to have lifelong issues because of what happened to them. The other thing I'd say for mothers of boys, boys I have learnt in the last year are not emotionally ready to deal with the impacts of childhood trauma until their early 20s. So what you were doing until they get to their early 20s is you're essentially managing anything that rise. Girls can be a little bit earlier, 17 or 18, but boys are not emotionally ready until sort of their early 20s. That was and there's a thing, a notion called for people who've experienced trauma is called protective denial. You can be displaying, or you can see worrying behaviors, and you will think, oh, it's as a result of the trauma. The person will say to you, it's got nothing to do with that. And it may have nothing to do with that, but it could be protective denial. So particularly childhood trauma, they've buried it so deep and it's too much to try and access it. Trauma is not something you need to outrun, or it's not something you need to get through. It's something that you need to accommodate and find a way to live with. It really is, because if you try to outrun it, you will exhaust yourself and it will always catch up with you. You need to accept that it happened. And sometimes you need to just say, you know what, that really, really sucked. Don't try to outrun it, because you won't.
What advice would you give to somebody that might be currently in an abusive relationship?
Trust your instincts. And although people will tell you to get out, you know when it is safe to do that. Don't do anything that you don't feel safe doing. The thing with people, they say, oh, well, if it's an abusive relationship, you've got to get far away. When you've got kids, or the most dangerous time for someone that leaves an abusive relationship is when they have left them. That is when they are most at risk. You know within yourself what you need to do. And trust your instincts, because you are stronger than you can possibly imagine. And there's numbers like DV Connect and so forth, if it's safe to do so, to ring. They're very experienced and can help give you tips. We've used counsellors and therapists and so forth. I did actually meet with someone in DV Connect just to talk about my experience. But look, early on I did get legal aid, but I was very fortunate that people that knew me had connections with other people that I was able to get assistance in that way.
So just before we wrap things up, is there anything else that you would like to share that you mightn't have had a chance to before?
Oh, okay. Yeah, my Instagram page is about it's not just domestic violence. My experience is domestic violence, but helping people who have been through trauma navigate to a more positive place while living with those experiences. It's just things, if you're struggling at the moment, it's just a little space on the internet for a brain break, I guess. And look, domestic violence is very isolating. And the only other thing I would say is, I see you and I want you to be safe, and I do understand that it can feel very, very lonely and hard, but you can get through it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story of hope. If you know of anyone that might be struggling with domestic violence, please feel free to share this podcast with them. If you believe in the value of sharing these stories and would like to donate to show your support, I'd really appreciate it. To find out more about donating, please visit afterdarkpodcast.com/donate. So, until next time, my name is Isaac Morano, and this is the After Dark Podcast.